skip like the presentation of Ronsella
Yeah.
or not on site.
A warning, how, what would work best? Should I send you an email or
even like a private message into the chat?
Private message, okay, we'll do that. I've turned on the live streaming, so we should, yes. And just so to let you know, we are live on YouTube, so they see everything what we see now. I'm going to admit people and then turn off the microphones. People should slowly come in.
Hello to everybody. We'll still give a few minutes for people to arrive, and then we'll start. Okay, I would say we start now. So good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you are, to everyone. My name is Peter Salomon from the Joint Research Center of the European Commission. I'm chairing today's second Global Flood Partnership virtual session on global flood forecasting, together with Roberto Rudari from the CIMA Foundation, and also with the help of Albert Kettner from the University of Colorado in Boulder. So it's really a pleasure to see again so many of you here today. Let me see if I can change the slide. So today, as I said, is the second session of the series of Global Flood Partnership virtual assessments that we are having. The last one last week, and the first one that we actually ever made, was really successful, and I hope many of you have seen it. For those that haven't, there is now the YouTube video recordings. The links are now available on the GFP webpage in the section where the virtual sessions are described. But let's move on now with today's session, which is on global flood forecasting. But before I go into and present the speakers today, just a very few words about the Global Flood Partnership, because I mean, many of you that are here today have either heard this already last week or know have been to the Global Flood Partnership meetings before or know a little bit about it, but I'm sure there's also some newcomers. So just a quick reminder, the Global Flood Partnership is really about building a framework, a cooperative framework between scientific organizations and flood disaster management managers worldwide, to really build a partnership between those groups, and look at how we can commonly bring forward all the global tools that we are working on in relation to flood risk management, so global flood forecasting, global flood monitoring, or global flood impact assessments, and really make use of those tools in order to reduce the impacts of floods worldwide, which is really the main aim of hopefully of all of us. So really, this bridging the gap between science and users is really at the heart of the Global Flood Partnership. And as you can imagine, this is even more so important when we are trying to use global tools that we are developing and trying to apply them for local problems in flood risk management. So this is really a big challenge, and here we try to really establish a dialogue between the end users or possible end users and the scientists and the developers of those global tools to make sure that we can really make a change and an impact in improving flood risk management. There's a number of ways how we do this, how we try to build this framework and bridge the gap between science and users. We try to share the latest scientific results or promote global flood risk research. We also try and support projects. One of the key elements that we have in the Global Flood Partnership is the support service that really enables, through a simple mailing list, access to in the case of a flood happening somewhere in the world, to be able to ask if somebody in the Global Flood Partnership may have some information, be it a forecast or be it a monitoring map or some other information about exposure or vulnerability that he can share for this specific emergency or event situation. Just the last word. So if you want to find out more about the GFP, have a look at our webpage. Or if you really want to be fully involved, then subscribe to our Google email group. You'll find how to do that on the GFP webpage. Usually we have annual meetings, but physically, as you know, this is due to the COVID situation, unfortunately not possible. I hope you will enjoy now these series of virtual sessions. And having said that, a few administrative comments. So you are encouraged to ask questions already in the chat during the presentations. We will not have questions directly after the presentations, but we'll be able to summarize a few key questions at the very end after all of the presentations, and then have a discussion. The presenters will already reply to your questions in the chat once they have finished their presentation. And once, if you want to then still have a question, or you have to raise your hand, and we'll open up your microphone then at the very end when we have still time for the discussion session. Now, today, I'm really glad to have those 5 speakers presenting really the latest state-of-the-art developments on global flood forecasting tools. So we'll start off right away with the first one, a presentation from Maggie Glasgow from the JPL NASA, advancing access to global flood modeling and alerting using the PDC disaster aware platform and remote sensing technologies. So I stop sharing. Maggie, the floor is yours.
Great, thank you so much. Let me start sharing my screen. And can everybody see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, great, wonderful. Thank you so much for the opportunity to speak today, and good day to everybody. As Peter said, my presentation today is about advancing access to global flood modeling and alerting. And this project is a large project with a number of COIs, as are listed here on the title screen. And I'll jump right into it. As you know, probably, flooding is a frequent event responsible for significant impact worldwide. As of September 2020, there have already been 91 flooding events globally. And since 2000, on average, there have been 100 floods annually occurring worldwide that have caused about $10 billion US financial loss per annum. And this slide shows the flooding frequency per year across the continents, and the flood damage in US billion dollars per year. And as you can see, this is a great global impact across the world. So the focus of our project includes 4 major components. It uses disaster aware, which is the PDC's open access global flooding alerting system for effective dissemination of flood risks and potential impacts to aid with emergency response. And central to the project is incorporation of flood model outputs and remote sensing derived products from multiple platforms to help with the mitigation of flood risk and increased resilience of impacted communities. The 4 main components are a model of models approach to help forecast severity at a global scale by integrating flood outputs from 2 simulation models. And I'll go into that specifically in this talk. But there are other 3 components to the project, which include inundation outputs from Earth observations that will validate the model of models, a machine learning based flood damage assessment that will generate impact outputs for vulnerable locations, and an end-to-end pipeline that integrates all 4 above mentioned components into the disaster aware platform. Oops. So there are 3 major tracks of the project, which I just mentioned. So there's track 1, which is the model of models approach. Track 2, which is the Earth observation-based flood extent extraction, and track 3, which is the machine learning-based damage assessment using Earth observation data. So today I'm going to focus on model of models approach because that is our global flood forecasting component of the project. The objectives of the model of models approach are fourfold, and the purpose is to deploy and develop this approach integrating hydrodynamic models and remote sensing derived products for flood forecasting. So we integrate two globally operational flood forecasting models, GLOFAS and GFMS. And we then classify flood severity and send alerts based on the severity level, similarly to the USGS pager severity alert for earthquakes. And we use the PDC disaster aware platform to do this. This then provides situational awareness information for impacted communities in near real time for response and recovery efforts. We then validate and calibrate these models using synthetic aperture radar and other Earth observation derived flood outputs. So this is the model components and weighting criteria. We use GLOFAS and GFMS to get flood severity. GLOFAS has it in point regions and GFMS and raster. From then we get event identification severity. We take a watershed-based risk index and create a threshold-based flood output, flood-based output for incident hazards, and then we feed that into disaster aware. Down below, we see the weighting factors for each of the models. GLOFAS has 20-year percent levels, 5-year percent levels, 2-year, and then they get alert level, medium, high, and severe, and then days until peak. The weighting factors for GFMS are total area, percent area, mean depth, max depth, and duration of flooding. So what exactly is the Watershed Risk Index for riverine score? This provides information for 16,000 basins, considers 9 event return periods, and incorporates the level of flooding protection, and then gives expected annual affected population. We use the Watershed Risk Index because we wanted to have a quantification of a level on which to base the alerts. And then for the two flood forecasting models, for GFMS, it uses real-time precipitation information from NASA Global Precipitation Mission, GPM, satellites, and implements a hydrologic runoff and routing model for flood detection. It's at a quasi-global scale and is implemented at an 8-degree lat-long grid. The following outputs generated at 3-hour intervals at a 0.125 degree grid resolution are used in the model of models. The size and area percent in a watershed impacted by a flood, depth above baseline, and duration of days. For GLOFAS, it's a global hydrologic forecasting and monitoring system independent of administrative and political boundaries. It couples state-of-the-art weather forecasts with a hydrologic model to provide downstream countries with information on upstream river conditions, produces daily flood forecasts and monthly seasonal stream flow outlooks, and severity indicators are used daily for the model of models, probability of return period, 2, 5, and 20 years, alert peak level, and peak forecast in days. So how is this used in our system? So we had a case study in spring of this year for the flooding in Central and East Africa. The countries, particularly Kenya, Somalia, Sudan, South Sudan, and the Democratic Republic of Congo, experienced severe flooding this past spring as they had greater than normal rainfall occurring in their long rain season. So flooding in Africa led to exposure and risks to vulnerable populations and infrastructure. And oftentimes these risks are compounded by multiple associated events. Heavy rainfall causing both flooding and landslides. The disasters program at NASA, in fact, activated for research purposes for this event. And you can see what we did for this particular event at the following URL. Now, what we did for the riverine basins was to capture the watershed risk in terms of watches, warnings, and advisories. Now, the riverine basins that have no hatches or dots are not affected at all. But as you can see in some basins you have hatches, which are watches, dots, which are advisories, and slants, which are warnings. Now, the most severe of these are the watches, and the least of these are advisories. Now, we have a comparison here of the model of models output and the disaster aware manual alerts for September 21st, 2020. As you can see, we have a number of alerts here that were indicated by the model of models outputs compared to disaster aware's alerts. And we have a fairly good alerting in comparison, but you'll see that in some cases there we have a better alerting than disaster aware. Just a little note on disaster aware, on the disaster aware platform. Disaster aware is maintained by the PDC, which is a University of Hawaii applied research center. It provides multi-hazard warning and situational awareness information through mobile apps and web-based platforms. And the operational version is used by multiple national and international agencies, including the UN. It provides early warning alerts, risk and vulnerability, hazard impact estimation, and lists the critical needs. Now, the current capabilities of disaster aware lacks a global flood identification and alerting component, and doesn't integrate remote sensing components to enable near real-time validation of simulated flood modeling results. This is the reason why the PDC approached us to work with them on this particular project. The use of remote sensing imagery to validate the near-time results of flood models incorporated into disaster aware will help them with situational awareness and impact estimation to quantify their disaster impacts. And the integration of these publicly available global flood modeling resources and remote sensing platforms will help them to create a robust and comprehensive platform for flood damage assessment and alerting that will help them with community resilience. So we see here that we have this sort of feedback loop here where we have the flood models to help with global flood identification and alerting, remote sensing that enables the near real-time validation of simulated flood results, which feeds into disaster aware, which is used for situational awareness and impact assessment, which leads to greater resilience, which includes integration of these components, which will create the robust and comprehensive platform, which will help with resilience. Right now, PDC has a platform for disaster aware that includes 7,000 users globally, and their free-to-use disaster alert app that has over 1.4 million users globally. And with that, I think that is the end of my presentation. So I can take questions in the chat, and we'll be happy to participate in the discussion at the end of the rest of the discussion. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Margaret. Thank you for the presentation. Thank you a lot, for keeping the time, almost perfectly. Thanks a lot for that. Very much appreciated. I renew, let's say the invitation, to all the, to the audience basically to pose questions already in the chat, so that Margaret can already like prepare and read through it, and maybe respond to some of them directly into the chat. But we will certainly have time for discussion later on. I would like now to introduce the second speaker of today, that is Erwin Soter from the ECMWF, that will actually go on and explain what are the new development of the global flood awareness system, the GLOFAS, that is one of the components of the model of models that we just seen in Margaret's presentation. So Erwin, please, the floor is yours. Try to share your screen. If you check if that works.
Thank you, and hello everybody. I'm sharing now my screen. I hope it'll work. So let me know if it's on the screen.
That's
is it?
Perfect. We all see.
Yeah,
that.
perfect. Thank you so much for the opportunity. I'm very happy to talk about the global flood awareness system, alas GLOFAS as we call it. In this talk, in particular, I will focus on the service part, the service evolution of the system, basically in the last few years as it has been developed. GLOFAS is, how to move the slides forward. Okay, so this is it worked. So GLOFAS is a collaborative effort, collaboration at its best, I would say. ECMWF, we operate the system together with the Joint Research Center of the European Commission, JRC. We develop the system, but there are also other institutions, collaborators like the University of Reading, RIMES, and others who actually help mainly in the evaluation and the analysis of the data. GLOFAS tries to be a global complementary information. So we are there if basically either on top of the local, national, or regional hydrological prediction systems, or basically as an only available system in some areas. And this is especially useful if disasters strike in areas, and unfortunately they don't really look out for areas where all the capabilities are there. And humanitarian agencies, Red Cross and others are then going to be able to use our predictions, and especially use it in kind of like medium range mode when early warnings kind of will be there to use. It's a probabilistic system, providing hydrological forecast, as Maggie nicely introduced it before me, for the next 30 days, and also in the seasonal component for the next 4 months or 16 weeks at the moment. It's run at the moment on 10-kilometer resolution globally. GLOFAS has this wonderful advantage of being part of the Copernicus infrastructure. So we are part of the Copernicus Emergency Management Service. All our data is open and free for actually any user, and it's really encouraged that users actually take this up and use it. So we are around 6,000 with registered users. Web data kind of products are available after registration. Several hundred people seem to be using it daily, so hopefully it's kind of like acknowledged as well. How can the users access our kind of products? Through which services? First of all, there is the web, as I mentioned. So the web map viewer, currently 22, but from December, when we have the new model version implemented, there will be 35 layers in total available. Forecasts are available. Users can go back out to 2011. So basically all the real-time forecast, whichever number of layers back then were available. So it's a good way to actually see also the evolution. Related to this, the web map service is there to basically service all these web charts, and the users can ingest it in any kind of GIS applications. Also, we have been running an additional tailored data services through a dedicated FTP stream. So there are quite a few participating and collaborating institutions, national, international organizations. I just heard that the PDC itself, or the World Food Program, as it was mentioned last week, or the Red Cross in many locations around the world, in the especially in the forecast-based financing projects. They are using heavily GloFast. And the most recent area where we can actually provide the data is through the Copernicus Climate Data Store. It's a wonderful idea of collecting all sorts of climate data, Earth system data, hundreds of thousands of data sets, and amongst them now GloFast is also available together with EFAS, which is the European part of this CHEMS flood project. And from December, 5 datasets will be available, accessible, downloadable, again only after registering. A little bit on the evolution. So basically, what was the timeline? So how did we end up having this global flood awareness system? It started out at least 10 years ago. 2011 was when still running, the system was running at the JRC, kind of like in an experimental fashion, but every day forecasts were produced, a website was designed, and ever since the data and the web products have been available. And then in 2015, when ECMWF was already the computational center for EFAS, the system was ported onto ECMWF platforms, and since then it has been basically running there at ECMWF, back then still not operationally supported. Another big step forward in November 2017, when we introduced the seasonal component, the first of its kind, providing global hydrological information out to 4 months lead time for high flow, low flow probabilities, using some kind of like ways of portraying the data. The big kind of change happened in April 2018, when GloFast finally was implemented operationally. Before this time, officially no money was spent on the system or the development. So since then, it's fully supported, 24/7 supported. And as part of this upgrade, we also introduced the seamless forcing system, relying after the first 15 days on ECMWF extended range forecast, which ever since basically has been in the system. A modeling upgrade, mainly a modeling upgrade, happened in November 2018. Since when we actually number the system to have the users obviously refer to the actual forecast version they are using or referring to. This was version 2.0. The routing component, which is done with the list flood hydrological model, was calibrated with over 1,000 stations, the discharge time series. On top of it, ERA5 and ERA5T, which is the timely, almost real-time, very near real-time available part, was introduced into climatology and also in initialization. We also introduced the reforecast, the concept of the 20-year reforecasts, and I will talk about that some more a little later. The last before now upgrade happened November last year, 2019, version 2.1. When the reanalysis was the first data set we actually entered into the CDS. So since then, it's over a year now, the data set has been available. Obviously, many times it has been downloaded, lots of data volume, etc. With each model upgrade, which actually impacts river discharge, we recompute all our products, the reanalysis, the reforecasts, the seasonal data sets, everything. So from this upgrade, basically, this protocol has been introduced. On top of it, we have also added a few products. One of them is the global flood risk assessment. Again, will be introduced a little further, and several new web products. The next upgrade is happening very soon, so almost imminent. Beginning of December, it's planned for the 2nd of December. So please look out. There will be kind of many new additions, which you will hopefully be happy to use on the web. It will obviously called version 2.2, further data sets in the CDS, and as I said, different products, forecast scale layer, and so on. Just a little summary on kind of like a flavor on what products we actually offer at the moment to the users on the web. A new group is the initial or antecedent conditions, which will be added in December. It relates to how we start basically the forecast, how the users basically interpret what is this kind of like a starting initial situation, precipitation, soil melt, other variables, and also anomalies of these using the R5, which is also part of our forcing the reanalysis and the initialization to provide anomalies. From the methodological forcing, currently we provide precipitation. So for forecast maps for the next 10 days, the mean, the probabilities for over a few thresholds. And as a new addition from December, the daily animated precipitation will also be available. This hopefully will have the users basically to kind of like track weather systems and give a better idea on how that actually evolves. We have ancillary data, layers, river network with upstream area, location of kind of like implemented reservoirs, lakes, all sorts of other information as well. The flood risk product, which is our first step, hopefully of many, to basically going towards the impact-based forecasting, which is kind of like the longer-term target. So in this product, we use the discharge information as kind of like the highest discharge in the 30-day forecast horizon, and based on a catalog of flood inundation maps, produce kind of like an estimate on where flood inundation is expected, and then it's kind of like cross related with vulnerability and exposure data sets. We produce kind of like a pop-up window with a matrix, as you can see in this example, with all sorts of qualitative information on kind of like the estimate on the impacted number of people, infrastructure, and also from December, this will be extended by the airports, health and education facilities, and also including information on the flood defenses from FlowPros. Therefore, if the defense is there, then maybe you won't see the colored area, the administrative units basically, which highlight if impacts are expected in a certain area. We also give further more detailed information in certain locations. We have a set of points, we call them reporting points, a few thousands of them, where we drill into the data and then give the regular hydrographs, and also from December time series graphs of the meteorological forcing, precipitation, snow melt, and temperature will be included. And on top of it, evolution of the forecast probability, the exceedance probabilities are also there in tables. So basically more and more information is available. How about this data sets? I mean, this we really believe is a very strong point of GloFAS as a unique system. All our data that we produce is going to be available in MARS, which is the Meteorological Archival Retrieval System of ECMWF. It's a data archive basically that is behind the CDS, the Climate Data Store. It has hundreds of petabytes of data, which now also includes hydrological data, which we are very proud of. The reanalysis was the first a year ago entering the system. Then this year in May, we added the real-time GloFAS forecast, the 30-day forecast, and in December, the remaining three, so the seasonal real-time forecasts, the 30-day reforecast, and the seasonal reforecast will be added. This is kind of a large data set if you look at it this way, especially the reforecast. The seasonal reforecast started in 1981. Every month, basically, we have a forecast. So it's a long stretch of forecast, kind of like similarly produced. For the medium range, or the 30-day, as we call it, version, we rely upon ECMWF's 20-year reforecast, as we call it, which basically is a system in real time. They produce forecast for the past 20 years, always for Mondays and Thursdays, with a limited number of ensemble members. For computational reasons, it's not possible to produce with the full 51 ensemble members as it is in real time. Over 2,000 forecasts in this system over a 20-year period, so it's a long period, many forecasts. It's an excellent way of kind of like evaluating the forecast or the focus performance of the system, kind of like working out post-processing algorithms and the like. As a first application in the verification arena, in December, we're introducing a new layer, which is a forecast performance layer. This will utilize this 20-year forecast and produce kind of like show the lead time when the CRPS scale score drops below 0.5, kind of like seen against two benchmarks, the persistence and the climatology. So in this work and this product, everything is verified with or against the reanalysis. So far, no observations are used. There will be further verification products later. Now an example on basically how GLOFASS can work and can showcase basically the capability of the systems. GLOFASS is not yet the finished article. So there are areas where the model performance is lower. There are areas where obviously we are more capable of picking up flood signals. This area in Bangladesh on the Brahmaputra River is definitely an area where we can look very far ahead. So the predictability is really long. In this case, floods occur every year, kind of almost regularly. In this year, they had like 2 big waves in June, end of June, and also most of July. And from the forecast, I picked the 10-day forecast. And by the way, thanks Sazad Hossain from the Bangladesh Flood Forecasting Center and also PhD students at Reading University to provide this case study. So the 10-day forecast, as you can see, the pattern of the increase or decrease of the discharge pretty much matches, very, very nicely matches the observed discharge kind of like pattern. The values are different. We have a positive bias, quite significant positive bias in this location. But as we intend or try to say to the users, the intended use of GLOFASS is basically look at the forecast in the context of its own climatology. That kind of flood signal is pretty realistic. In this case, we could look ahead, as you can see on the top right corner graph, 15 days ahead. There was a strong signal, albeit with very strong and very high uncertainty, but still a good indication of a very early heads up on a potential significant flood down the line. Okay, but what's going to happen with GLOFASS? I mean, GLOFASS has been operational for just over 2.5 years, and this is the period where we could really put resources and effort in developing the system. And we will always look into developing and improving the system in all sorts of different areas. 2 major upgrades are planned. One of them is looking into the core of the system, so basically how hydrology is modeled. So far, it has been based on the HDSL land surface model of ECMWF. We are switching to the full configuration using list flood in a rainfall runoff model configuration, basically. So it's a major upgrade. We try to look at all sorts of different aspects, basically, about it. Another one will be a major resolution change, going from 10 kilometer to 5 kilometer. Part of it, we also upgrade all the maps, the underlying maps, not just the river network, but also soil maps, land use, all the like. So it will really expect it to have a significant positive impact. Other developments are planned. One of them is to look at how the thresholds are used in the 30-day component and switching from the one RFI based threshold to a kind of like a range dependent one, which represents the biases properly, and also other products like the global flood monitoring products. Remember Peter's talk last week, we are really looking forward to it, or having a flash flood kind of prediction layer based on EC point, rainfall post-processing product of ECMWF, or other verification maps or modeling improvements, of course. So basically the list is long and we are working hard. Please go on the website, use the data, use the forecast, go on the CDS. It's excellent. Use the CDS kind of like has also like a toolbox where you can just really go and dig into data, merge different data sets and plot them right there and then. And also there's an API, so the data can programmatically be added into your systems. It's excellent. If you are interested, go and check out these kind of like scientific papers. Basically, they will show all sorts of details about how GLOFAS, the methodology, has been evolving and how the system was developed in the last few years. And with this, thank you so much.
Thanks so much, Erwin. I mean, for the very rich presentation. I mean, we will take some minutes. I mean, also the audience. I mean, to digest. I mean, the great deal of information that you have presented, and I will pass it down then. I mean, to the third speaker of today. That is Stella Nevo from Google, that will talk about progresses and challenges in high accuracy flood forecasting on global scales, which is quite an intriguing title. So we are really looking forward for your presentation, Stella. If you would like to try to share your screen and steal the screen, I mean, to Erwin, please proceed.
Sure. Thank you, Roberto. And let's see if this is working. Can you see my screen now?
Perfect.
Excellent. So hi, everyone. My name is Stella, and I lead the Google Flood Forecasting Initiative. The goal of this effort is to use Google's data, computational resources, and machine learning expertise to empower governments and other organizations to provide accurate and actionable flood alerts globally. Our focus is currently on riverine floods, as opposed to flash floods or coastal floods. And today I want to talk about the challenges in scaling riverine flood forecasting systems to a global scale, while retaining the accuracy and actionability of high-end systems, and also discuss some of our recent progress towards that goal of high accuracy global flood forecasting systems. I want to focus on three important components of such a system. The first will be the hydrologic model, the second will be the inundation model, and then the third component will be the warning distribution at the end. Let's dive straight into the first one. The hydrologic model, as I assume many of you knows, accepts various inputs, including precipitation, soil moisture, soil radiance, and more, and produces as an output a forecast for either discharge or sometimes even water level throughout the river. And the classic approach for these kinds of models is that each component represents a separate physical process. And while in practice, we don't have nearly enough information to kind of actually define the forcing data to implement full physics-based models, we use simplistic conceptual models that approximate them. Now, this methodology, which has ever since at least the models we're using today, many of them existed since the 70s, has several disadvantages, several downsides. Right? One is that despite being relatively complex from a human standpoint, they're relatively simplistic relative to the actual physical processes. They are often over-parameterized. Right? We have a quality called equifinality, which means that many different parameters tend to lead to the same results and can match the historical data, but that doesn't mean they will towards in future predictions. And they also will often require continuous manual calibration, or at least the high-end systems that we tend to kind of trust the most will require manual calibration by experts, which can lead them to become incredibly expensive and not scalable. And so the approach that we and several other groups have been taking in recent years has been to kind of take a significant turn and instead go in the opposite direction of modern machine learning architectures. So specifically, the type of model that we think the results have been most impressive so far are LSTMs, which are a type of neural network that is optimized for modeling time series, and specifically time series that require a long memory, right? So for example, in hydrologic models require to remember, let's say if months ago there was more snow that affects what happens right now. So LSTMs are a very natural choice for doing this kind of modeling. But really the most important aspect that I want to kind of share with these models is that there really is pretty much no explicit modeling of the different processes. Instead, we allow the model to estimate the different processes on its own. And while, of course, data-driven models have been kind of an option for many years and have often underperformed relative to more process-based models, we think that these modern architectures are showing us some different results that are worth taking note of. So one result that I want to share, and this is work done in collaboration with Frederick Kratzert and Ray Nearing and Sepp Hochreiter and several other contributors, has shown that when benchmarked across a wide range of basins, this is specifically based on the CAMELS dataset in the United States, it's about over 600 different gauge sites across the United States, we achieve some very interesting results. So I'll take maybe a minute to go over and broadly say what we are seeing here. So this graph is a comparison of different models across the United States. So each line represents a different model, and you can see here the different ones that have been benchmarked. And what you're seeing is a cumulative distribution function over the Nash-Sutcliffe efficiency coefficient. But for those of you who are not familiar with these terms, all you need to know is lower is better, right? That means we're getting better scores on more sites. And here you can see the performance of these new LSTM-based models across all of these sites. And what we can see is a significant improvement across different sites. And it's also worth mentioning that these benchmarks are compared to when the creators of the original models have benchmarked it themselves. This is not us benchmarking the other models that we are competing against. But in addition to quality improvements, there are two other advantages that are a bit harder to see from this graph alone in these kinds of models. The first is just scalability. While classical models require kind of continuous calibration and often recalibration to achieve high accuracy, these models have been trained with a single LSTM trained across the full data set. So this is a single click of a button, a single training. There is no manual calibration in this process, which allows us to scale this to many more locations than was at least convenient in the past. And then the second is generalization. Actually, the graph that you're seeing right here is not a fair comparison between these models. All classical models that you've seen originally have been given data for the specific basin that they are being tested on, while the two LSTM models that you're seeing here, these two lines, have had the site that they are tested on hidden from them. All of the results that you're seeing here are for sites that they've never seen data from the site that they are being tested on. And what this means is that this really gives a lot of room for hope for kind of ungauged basin prediction, right? Because this means that we can achieve some level of generalization. Just a caveat, I'm not trying to claim generalization across completely different regions. These are all have been trained in the United States and have seen similar gauges, but there's at least some level of generalization here. Now, this is still a work in progress. We're still working on a lot of improvements to this kind of modeling. Two things that we are particularly focused on right now is one, how to efficiently communicate information between locations across the river network. And secondly, also combining this kind of shared model transfer learning approach that we've used in the previous slide, but combining that also with per site modeling that will allow the model to specialize more effectively to sites where we do have data. But we think there's a lot of exciting things going on here. Of course, for these models to be useful in practice, we don't just need to improve kind of academic results. It's no less important to tackle the practical issues that are inherent to real world data and operational systems. We've done a lot of work in recent years on reducing data latency, detecting and correcting errors in data collection, and increasing the speed and frequency at which these models are run, which is kind of a bit less sexy in conferences, but it's critically important for using these models not only in academia, but actually creating change on the ground. And this hard work has allowed us to launch these systems operationally, and currently covering about 75 million people in India and Bangladesh, in collaboration, of course, with the Indian Central Water Commission and the Bangladesh Water Development Board. So we've deep dived into the hydrologic model. I want to move on now to the second component of an actionable flood forecasting system, the inundation model, or sometimes called the hydraulic model. Now, these kinds of models simulate the water's behavior across the floodplain, like you're seeing on the screen right now. And this allows us to understand what areas exactly are going to be affected by an upcoming flood. And this means we can identify in advance who needs to be warned of danger, and no less importantly, where they can go to be safe. Now, the classic way to approach these types of modeling is through finite element solutions to the St. Venant or the shallow water equations. And this is also the kind of first approach that we've taken, implementing our own hydraulic models, which are equivalent in terms of their performance to standard models like HECRAS and so on, but we've kind of re-implemented them so that we can distribute them efficiently on Google's supercomputers. But right from the start, if you want to scale this thing globally and specifically for the regions that currently have the largest amount of flood-related fatalities and harms, you run into a few challenges very quickly. The first challenge is elevation maps. These models rely critically on elevation maps, at least if we want highly spatially accurate results. And in the majority of the world, it's very hard to attain maps that are at high enough a resolution to be effective. And you can see here an example of the simulation of the same river near Hyderabad, but one with 1 meter resolution and one with 90 meter resolution based on SRTM's elevation maps. And a second challenge is that even if you go through all the work and either purchase or collect data that's relevant to producing an elevation map, especially on a global scale, very quickly you'll find that it becomes out of date because some rivers change at a high rate, and we care about the morphology now, not several years ago, maybe when we collected the data. And the challenge is that producing these can be expensive, right? One classic way of doing this is through stereographic imagery, where we take multiple pictures of the same location with, let's say, a satellite or a plane. But again, because of these costs, if you want something that is global, it'll be at a low frequency. And so your data will be stale. We've taken a slightly different approach to producing these elevation maps. And instead of using expensive specialized satellite missions, we purchased large amounts of high resolution optical imagery that is captured anyway every day across the globe. And these are completely standard optical images, no specialized devices or missions required. And what we do is we then do a process that is somewhat similar to stereographic imaging. We use the differences between the images to deduce the height on the ground, but using these arbitrary images, which is much harder work on the software side, but that allows us to produce these high quality images on an annual basis anywhere we'd like in the world. And here you can see an example of that. This is specifically in the Yamuna River going through Delhi. But that's still not enough. And I want to share one example maybe that we've run into. What you're seeing here is an evaluation of one of the first alerts we ever sent out. And this one was in Patna about 2 years ago in India. And what you're seeing here in blue is areas that were indeed inundated and we've alerted. In purple, you can see areas that were not inundated but did receive an alert. The idea was to also warn people who are very close to the inundation, so we felt very comfortable with the purple buffer you can see here. The red blobs are areas that were inundated but did not receive an alert. And that's, of course, a big problem. And we have, most of them are pretty small and rare, except this big annoying blob of red here, which frustrated us for months because we just couldn't understand it. It didn't make sense physically. There's a huge embankment between the river here and the area that's flooded, and we couldn't understand how that happens. So we ended up flying to Patna and talking to the farmers there, and immediately they told us, oh, of course, when farmers want to water their fields, then they'll kind of dig holes in the embankment so the water surpasses. And this is very obviously something that would be very hard for us to know based on satellite data. So we started asking ourselves, well, how can we automatically learn this information, right? We want to be able to learn from experience, since we do have various types of data, let's say optical imagery and SAR imagery. So we wanted to automatically learn those aspects of the flooding behavior that we don't know a priori from first principles or from the data that we have. And what we've developed is an end-to-end machine learning model that correlates the gauge measurements directly to the flooding patterns. Now, this performs far better than physics-based components in areas with data scarcity, when the data we have to work with is pretty limited. But of course, it might not perform well, let's say, in unprecedented events and other challenging circumstances. So we set out to combine these two approaches and to learn automatically what we don't know. For example, anything that has to do with the riverbed, which at least in the elevation maps that we produce doesn't include the bathymetry since it's optically based, while still extending much of that information to the full floodplain using physics-based processes. And this has allowed us to really both improve the accuracy and scale up a lot of our operations. Our operational inundation models now cover about 240 million people, and we're working hard to expand them further. Now, I said that this is accurate. So here you can see an example, if you look at the bottom here, of another comparison between our forecasts and what ended up happening based on optical and SAR imagery. And as you can see, at a 64-meter resolution, we achieve pretty high precision recall, which means that we're usually right about what every 64-meter area on the ground. Of course, this is even more kind of inspiring to see when you look at it in real life. This is when we were in Bihar, India, while flooding occurred. And here you can see kind of our forecasts were standing right at the edge of where we expect flooding to begin. And as you can see, that is indeed where it happens. Finally, I don't have much time. I just want to quickly mention, of course, none of this is useful if it doesn't reach the right people in the right time. And we use Google's public alerts infrastructure to notify millions of people within minutes of an alert. We can notify them based on existing alerts that we get from governments and disaster management agencies, or based on the models that we just talked about, which we developed and approved in partnership with the relevant governments. We put a strong emphasis on making things visual, providing local information, making them interactive, supporting local languages. And just over the past few months, we've sent active alerts of warning to more than 10 million people. So that was kind of a quick overview of what we think are the most interesting challenges and what we've done so far to try and address them. And thank you all for listening.
Well, thank you, Salah. Definitely, I mean, it is really like, again, a dense presentation. I mean, full of inspiring, hints for everyone. And congratulations for, all the challenges that you've been taken upon. Thank you for that. I'm forecasting a lot of, questions actually, coming up in the chat, in the next few minutes, I'm pretty sure. With this, I would like actually to give the word to our fourth speaker, Juan, that will speak about exploring the answer impact on catchment scale floods towards a better monthly to seasonal flood forecast. So something more, let's say, classical. Please, Juan, the floor is yours.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yeah, perfectly, Juan. Go on.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Okay, thank you very much for having me. Yes, my topic will be a little different, but still, I think is a very relevant to this topic. And I'm going to talk in something a little behind of the system updates by previous speakers. And this work has been done recently by a few students and some colleagues listed here. And first, I'd like to share a few photos we took from last year's GFP meetings, as many of the GFPers and participants may not attend last year, but of course not this year, we cannot do it. But these moments hopefully can give you guys some good memories. And it's always been very nice to see GFPers every year face to face with a lot of updates and science chatting and meetings and hand-on experience, and also of course some beers. These are really good memories, and hope everything come back to the normal sewing. And so now I come back to my normal life. Usually I talk floods. So recently, Lorenzo Avery and many others, we have a paper defines a GFP as a global network of scientists and users for operational flood risk reductions for a lot of flood events, from the early warning and to the flood recession, and monitoring all of these flood dynamics, evolutions, and their potential impacts. And recently, for this year, some of you may notice that in China we had a really serious flood problems, and we do this similar thing. And according to the something like that, this diagram defined, and we provide flood information on daily basis every for the Ministry of Emergency Management of China, that's FEMA of China. And we got a lot of challenges, of course, for this response of the ongoing flood events, as already mentioned by the speakers in the last week. So one of the questions and challenges we got from this year's responding from the MEM, they particularly ask us, how can we provide this flood information even earlier? They ask for like 10 days and even longer, but we know that is very challenging. And even when we provide the monitoring-wise data information, like from the real-time forecasting, and even for the one-day forecasting, there's a lot of uncertainties, as we know. And but something we have to do, and the next flood season, just I think it's just coming the way. Just a couple of months away, we're going to have another flood season in China for the south part. So what we can do for this monthly the seasonal forecast is still always in our task list. So in this talk, I'm going to talk about what some prerequisites to work toward for better statistical modeling or machine learning, or provide more information for the dynamic modeling for a better long-term or seasonal forecast. So every flood has their own story, and mostly are driven by different precipitation. So precipitation is a major one causing the difference in the floods. But what are the characteristics of this precipitation actually are more important for flood occurrence than others? So it's not quite yet known. So what you look at here is that we mapping the precipitation climatology based on like 16 years trend data. You can clearly see that at the top left panel, PR shows the total amount of the precipitation, and while the second one, F25, that's the frequency of the daily precipitation over the 25 millimeter. And here's the intensity of the precipitation above the threshold 25 millimeter. And the last one is the amount of the precipitation above the 25 millimeter daily. So you can clearly see that the right three panels shows the similar patterns, but the intensity shows a quite different, a huge difference than others. So the basic question we can ask right away, which one, F25 or R25, which one is more important to trigger flooding? And this kind of information is very useful for us to better understand the flood mechanisms and for the prediction. So the objective of this study is first we furnish a climatological quantification of global floods and from the model simulations, and then we quantify the likely relationships between flood and the precipitation. And in the further stage, we further look into the possible impact of the climate modes, specifically here, the ENSO for both precipitation and the floods. So then the next, once we have the better understanding of this, we can use this kind of information for the better flood prediction at the various time scales. The model for this study, we use a model called the dry model, and I don't go to the more details here. And this is pretty similar as the GFP. We use a land surface model coupled with a routing model, and this model has been applied globally and for years and validated. Use a lot of ground observations and remote sensing and intercomparison with other models, etc. So one interested can look into this paper, but now I'm not going to that details. I use a dry model. We developed the global flood monitoring system, the GFMS, running nearly real-timely, 3-hourly, 1 degree resolution globally. And meanwhile, there are also a 1 kilometer resolution global stream flow simulation at the same time step. So the system has archived more than 20 years data since 2019 to 98. And with this, basically for this study, we use the data from such system by using a better quality precipitation with the ground gauge adjusted the TMPA version to drive the model for the 20 years. And then we use every time steps data, we define the flood events. We developed the methods like the right side here. Basically, we use a threshold map using the equations like the threshold defined as the 95 percentile plus standard deviation and with the stream flow concentration, etc. And then apply this threshold map to each grid series time series, basically putting the model simulations and compare to the threshold map, which is green, and come out to the flood events. And basically they will give you the flood indices, which are four here: flood frequency and the flood duration and the flood intensities. We look at these four flood indices, their relation to the precipitation indices. Four of them are the same by or in the previous slides. Here there are more others, but they are basically falling into three categories: frequency and intensity and the amount, but defined at different thresholds. So I'm going to share some results here. The top panels you are seeing before, and now we're connecting them to the flood. So from this, which is actually 16 years simulation results, and we aggregated by average at the monthly climatology, and then we can see here the flood frequency. Almost all of these flood indices basically follows the precipitation's spatial distributions, but flood frequency follows a beta to the precipitation amount and the frequency and the PR25 here. With those high values, basically approximately the same at the same locations in many places, but the other three indices shows a more fragmented spatial patterns, which is not surprisingly because they seem to also not only respond to the precipitation frequency and the amount, but also the response to the intensity of the precipitation. For example, the South American here, I cannot get my mouse here, but it did not show the peak on the frequency, but the flood intensity shows a more clear peak here. And when we look at the max correlated precipitation index with the flood indices for all of these four precipitation indices here, and this map shows there are even more fragmented distribution, which indicates that the nature of the inhomogeneity of our world. But however, we can see clearly collectively there are some patterns here, and we see more of the blue colors, which is the precipitation frequency, are more relevant to the flood frequency and flood duration. But for the flood intensity, you can see more the warmer colors, which is red, and it indicates the flood intensity comes into play a more important role here. If you look at this statistically, you can even see more clearly that the dominant role of the frequency of this extreme precipitation events is more important for the flood frequency and duration, but the flood intensity tends to be more associated with the total precipitation, which you can see here. There's green spikes of the green and dark blue bars here. And then we took a further step to look at these indices links at the basin scale, as we usually do the flood forecasting at the basin scale. So what do you see here? The peak months of the flood indices shows clearly that annual preferred flood occurrence time for each individual basins, and one can look into those areas that you are interested. And we can see this flood frequency and flood duration. Again, this shows similar patterns with a similar peak time, but they are different from the flood intensity peak months, which is very important for the flood risk and water resources management, because there's a different strategy would need to be adjusted for this kind of information. And when you compare this flood peaks to the precipitation over this flood precipitation indexes, you can see floods are usually consistent with precipitation special structures, but we can still see some of the river basins have like 1 month ahead of the peak. That they are different, but this difference between the flood indices and the precipitation indices and the differences between those precipitation indices themselves suggest that the different effects on floods from various characters of the precipitation itself. Then, importantly, we're trying to look at these indices linked to the ENSO, the simultaneous correlation between flood indices and the ENSO over those respective peak months of the flood indices. And we can clearly say that flood frequency and flood duration has significant positive and negative correlations with ENSOs. And we can even see the flood duration has even a stronger link to the ENSO in many areas. And because of time, I don't point out all of them, but you can clearly see those stronger colors, which is consistent with previous studies by Philip Ward using a different model and data. And when you look at the flood intensity, they also show different patterns with the flood frequency. But a clear pattern here is that in a north area, in the north to the 20-degree north, there are even stronger intensity linked to the ENSO, which is, I think this information is very important for the flood forecast. And again, we compare to the precipitation here, the ENSO links to this precipitation indices and also clearly shows that the ENSO effects actually their effects on the floods through modulating the precipitation, which we can tell from those same signs and similar spatial structures of the relation between the precipitation and the ENSO. And we also find that just to compare this slide and to this one, flood and precipitation, you can see that we are pleased to find that actual ENSO's footprint is stronger at the flood. That can be explained that the stream flow can be a better indicator of the water cycle of a real basin scale. And it might also, the ENSO can modulate other important variables which affect the floods too, which warrants further studies. But these are very good news to say that the ENSO affects the floods through the precipitation. And even more important that we are looking at when we map out the ENSO's leading months with the highest correlation between the ENSO and the flood indices, so we can clearly say there are then we can say this ENSO lead months can be 1 to 5 months ahead of the floods, and with a significant relations there, and even some simultaneously the correlation peaks shows in some of the real basins, but meanwhile the significant correlation can still hold for a few ENSO lead months, which is as shown in this slide here, and this is another very good news. That means we can use more of this kind of information continuously for a few months into the future for the flood seasonal forecast. So, we don't have the time to look into one-to-one comparison, but I will encourage you, one interested can look into these figures, just to play the one-to-one comparison and flip over, and you can see more interested information in your interested area too. And here's my taking home messages. I would go real quick. Flood frequency and flood duration tend to be more related to the precipitation frequency. The flood intensity tends to be associated with daily precipitation volume corresponding to this extreme precipitation events, particularly the precipitation larger than 10 millimeter. And the significant simultaneous and ENSO leading flood relations are found in many of the real basins, which is very useful. And I think that's all what I'm going to share. And for more details, I would point those to go to these 3 papers and for more details. Thank you very much. That's all what I have, and we'd be glad to have any questions.
Thank you so much, Juan. Thank you for the presentation. I think, we can fast moving forward, to the last presenter today. That is Kei Yoshimura from the University of Tokyo, talking about the predictability of the floods caused by Typhoon Agibis in 2019, using today's Earth. Kei, we are looking forward to your presentation. If you would like to try and steal the screen to Juan.
Juan, can you?
Yes, I did. Okay.
Perfect.
Okay. Hi, everyone. Good evening. Actually, it is now 12:30 in midnight in Japan, so it's kind of harsh timing. But my name is Kei Yoshimura from Japan University of Tokyo, and I'd like to present on the predictability of the floods caused by Typhoon Hagibis 2019 using today's Earth, which is our global flood forecasting system. And then there are a bunch number of names here. So these are our collaborators, and also this work is collaboratively done by University of Tokyo and JAXA. So starting from, I would like to start with some flood events serially occurred over Japan. So it's starting from 2015 events. So I'm going to start the video, but it has some sounds, so please be minded. So heavy precipitation caused by two typhoons, but actually it's not the directly caused by the typhoon, but indirect. But as a result, whole city, Joso city was inundated, and then 10,000 citizens or 11,000 houses were inundated. So actually, it struck me. It was a very shocked moment for myself because it's actually quite close to my residence, and so I was I didn't realize that it also happens to like urban area like near Tokyo. So actually, it triggered our motivation towards the flood forecasting. So three years later, 2018, there was an even worse floods hits occurred in west part of Japan. It is called West Japan heavy rain, and then it was caused by Bayou front, so rain band. But it was 24 accumulated rainfall was all very many record-breaking rainfall was recorded. And then actually it killed more than 200 people. And then the left bottom part, it's a hydrograph at one river called Takahashi River. It is only 48 hours, 2 days in the horizontal axis. And so the hydrograph here, blue line, is very rapid. It's so typical flash flood. But even because of this very rapid change of the water level, so that 50 people could not escape from this basin, then actually more striking is 80% of this casualty was elderly people who couldn't escape even to the rooftop of the residence. So it reminded us the necessity of the longer lead time of the flood forecast. So actually, and then last year, Typhoon Hagibis hit Japan in October, and then it actually caused serious damage over 70 river systems, and then killed more than 100 people. And it's one of the most devastating damage in the Nagano prefecture. And then actually what it was unique here was actually this was ECMWF's typhoon prediction, but the ensemble spread was very small. So the predictability of this event meteorologically was quite high. And then actually we created something called Today's Earth. Please Google Today's Earth, or please click this link if possible. But it's a near real-time land surface simulation system. And then globally 1/4 degree, and then actually it has a regional version over Japan is 160 degree. Which is corresponding to the 1 kilometer. So with exactly the same modeling system. And then uniqueness is forced by multiple satellite-based atmospheric variables. including GSMAP precipitation or modest radiation. And then it is downloadable up to 1958. So the forecast version is going to be tested, which I'm going to introduce from now. So this is a graphical user interface of the system. And then similarly, it's similar to the GLOFAS or MAGIS system. It has like globally, I mean, zoom in and zoom out system, and then many variables, not only discharge quantity, geophysical quantities, but also return period of major variables as well. So that, and then, as I said, it has a regional version, today TE Japan. And so the system can be ported to any other of the regions. So actually, we are planning to extend it to the other, for example, Indonesia, I mean the Southeast Asia or Africa and so on. This is the data flow, but because of the time limitation, I will skip it. But it has not only physical quantities, but also it has a return period, how rare the values are as well. And then this is a structure of prediction system using today's Earth. So as I said, today's Earth system is until near real time, but as you can use it by using forecasted atmospheric variables, we can apply towards the future. So this is a schematic diagram, and then some video is also showing, sorry, in partly Japanese. We developed a reliable flood prediction system over all Japan, aiming to provide those information well before hazard. So, I mean, it is relatively shorter, I mean, 1 to 2 days, but actually for Japan, I mean, it fits because of short and smaller basin size over, I mean, in total. And then before moving on to the case studies, but I would like to introduce general performance of the system. So we handcasted for 11 years by using that system. And then every 3 hours, we forecasted 33 hours. So every 3 hours, we have 11 sets of forecasting time series. So, and then we assess the accuracy in each lead time. So how the performance is degrading as the lead time longer lead time. And then we use PSS, Pierce Skill Score, to express the performance, which consists of the hit rate minus false alarm rate. And using 850 water level measuring stations over Japan. As I said, it is 11-year handcasted experiments. And then, so horizontal axis is forecasting lead time, and then the vertical axis is a skill score. And then zero reference is when we use, I mean, it's a zero analysis. So using observed atmospheric forcing, and then try to simulate the discharge. So it's a kind of a maximum scale of our system, and it degrades over time. And the reference value is how it interprets the PSS is positive value have a predictability, and then 0.25 it means good predictability. So forecast 33 hours before, it shows having positive PSS at more than 90% out of 850 stations. And then 12 hours before, 0.25, so it means a good predictability. So of course, we are not satisfied with this performance, and then there is lots of room to be improved. However, by showing such kind of performance or the evaluation, then user can choose, depends on the purpose, how those kind of information can be utilized for their purpose. So let's move on to the 2015 case and the 2018-2019 case. So 2015, it was actually simulated after the event. So ensemble forecast was tested, and then the top one is a precipitation. So there is an ensemble spread from this particular initial condition. And then depending on this precipitation, the discharge is simulated. And then there is a large variance of the ensemble member. However, what it is showing here is we can quantify how dangerous the situations are. So we set the thresholds, and this is regarded as evacuation level, but by showing the bottom right figure, 39 hours before, 36 ensemble member out of 50 shows more than the flooded or alert, but that rate increases over time. So 15 hours before the actual disaster, almost 100% of the members are showing the sign of floods. So actually, it successfully focused it even in the middle-size basin, only exceeding 1,000 square kilometers. So it is regarded as a weakness of a global system, but actually it can be applied for such a scale as well. And then this framework is globally applicable. So 2018, actually we draw a similar GLOFAST type table, and then showing red is alert. But compared to the real situation occurred, only 3 hours before, actually there was a alert from the government, but it can be extended towards more than 24 hours, possibly. So it may, this is an example in 2018. And then moving on to just last year, actually this figure, this illustration was used when the actual disaster was happening. So exactly the same figure is shown here. So as typhoon approaches, the river discharge amount is increased, turns into green, yellow, or orange, like blood vessels. But that level of water discharge, river discharge is, we cannot convert it to the danger level directly, because there are big rivers or small rivers. So we also simulate inundated area by using the Keimer flood model. So Keimer flood is able to simulate inundated fraction. So inundated fraction is actually a more fair indicator of the flood. So from totally violet blue color in the beginning, but it suddenly turns into yellow or red in the many places. So it indicated the danger of the danger for those areas, which was predicted day before what is happening. And then it turned out, and actually I was so worried at that time, but actually it happened as somehow simulated or predicted. So according to the authority, there were 142 levee broken sites. And out of that, TE Japan successfully gave alerts, which is defined as once in 200-year water level at 129 sites. So the recall is more than 90%. And then the good point is there is plenty of lead time, more than 30 hours. However, there is what it shows in the figure is white pins are showing a false alarm. So false alarm rate was, somehow 90%, and it varies in time, but about 70 to 80%. So yeah, that's actually a shortcoming. However, we are not so worried about such a large number of false alarm because this is a levee break. And then levee break is when levee break occurred, we actually the safety level of the different place is getting safer. So it means that, and then our system is showing alerts along the river. So actually it isn't so, how can I say, wrong to show pins over the along the rivers here. Well, actually, those information cannot be provided to the citizens directly in Japan. Actually, so there because of a law. So only those information is provided to the municipals right now, and then there are many municipals as a collaborative research right now. So we are trying to find a way to utilize those predicted information with the municipal officers. And then actually there was a flood occurred this year as well. And then there were two very different floods. One is caused in July because of the biofront over Kyushu Island. And then other is Typhoon Haishen in September. And actually Typhoon Haishen was anticipated. I mean, July, there was a flood in July, so that Typhoon Haishen was very much worried about flood. Bigger damage was anticipated as Haishen approached. However, as a result, it did not cause too serious damage. And then our system also didn't show as much as July event. So it proved that somehow our correction system is quite right. And then future direction, as a future direction, I would like to introduce newest work done by Mr. Oki. It's a fusion with a satellite observation, especially synthetic aperture radar, SAR. And then today's Earth is shown in the left-hand side, and then SAR is shown here, right-hand side. And then using TE prediction as a prior of the Bayesian estimates of the inundation area, so that actually it helped to improve the inundated area detection. So in terms of the precision and also computational efficiency. So we quickly implemented this scheme into the operation system, so that nowadays we actually in July event, we could use this system to estimate the inundation for the Kyushu Islands floods, promptly announced in case of right after the image was taken. And then actually I concentrated on the Japanese system. So this is an example for the global, one of the global example. And then actually, unfortunately in Vietnam, there was a series of typhoons, tropical cyclones hits in a row. And then our TE global, even though it is a lower resolution, 1/4 degree, the return period of the discharge is showing the animation here in the daily scales, and then it shows a pretty high value depending on the day, and then it actually helps to show the alerts. I mean, show the danger level for those areas. So this is the summary, and then because of the time limitation, I wouldn't read it. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Kei. I mean, for your presentation. I mean, very interesting. Thank you for that. And I'm thanking also, I mean, all the other presenters that really gave us and deliver, I mean, very nice in presentation. I mean, you could see, I mean, from the reaction of the audience that we have a lot of interest there. Now, I mean, I would declare, I mean, together with Peter, the discussion, let's say, session open. Maybe, I mean, one thing I will start with doing is to resume a few of the key questions that were posed, I mean, and also answered already, like in the chat, that might help, I mean, a little bit, you know, the discussion flow. And so Margaret, Maggie, I mean, if you agree, I will start with you. I mean, you've been the first speaker and having had, like, I mean, to deal with many questions, actually, I mean, in your chat, and you've been replying to them, I mean, very nicely. I've actually picked, I mean, two teams and that, I mean, came along, I mean, more frequently, I mean, in the questions. And maybe, I mean, it would be nice, I mean, if you could say a few words in live, I mean, lively, I mean, here. So the first one is in respect to the validation of the system. There were many, I mean, questions about how you validate the system, if you use the Earth observation data, if you are using other information also, I mean, to validate the system, both in the hazard component and the impact component, and how you deal with, for example, if you're using the remote sensing part, I mean, how you deal with the mismatch in scale between, you know, this and the source of data for the validation. So maybe, I mean, if you want to start from that. And then the second one, I mean, deliver also the second themes to you, which I think is very important. There were, I mean, few questions about how do you, let's say, insert, or if you would deliver also additional information in addition to the level of alert, like, you know, the extent that you certainly do, because you have like both the models and your part there, but also the flood depths and the flood duration part component. If that is considered, I mean, you use some proxy or you deliver, I mean, this type of information, or you plan to deliver it. Thank you, Maggie. I mean, if you want to.
Sure. So on the first question about the resolution and the for the flood models and the Earth observation data, I believe that the way that they handle that is that they interpolate the data. So what they do is they either downsample or upsample the Earth observation data so that it matches the flood models. And that way they're able to validate that way. So, and then as for the other question about, I believe that there was a question about whether we use other data other than Earth observation data to validate the flood models. And right now we're not using other than Earth observation data. I know that there's in situ data that is available, but we haven't integrated that into the system as of yet. But there's some consideration of perhaps using in situ data to help validate other than using the Earth observation data. As to the second question, I'm sorry, could you remind me what the second question was, Roberto?
Yeah, sure. That's if you are, let's say, delivering also information about not only on the, let's say, on the extent of the flood, but also on the water depth, I mean, related to the floods, and also on the flood duration. I mean, what type of variables, I mean, are connected, I mean, to the flood alerts.
Yes, so we are using the Earth observations to deliver the flood inundation extent, or sorry, the flood extent, but we're also creating high resolution DEMs to help to determine the flood depth. So the inundation and depth information will be secondary alerts that will be delivered to the PDC. So disaster aware allows us to provide the flood severity alert as a primary alert, and then create secondary alerts within that alert. And so the flood depth and extent will be created as a secondary alert or additional information within that flood severity alert that comes out from our model of models. We're also, as I mentioned, there's a third track that is going to include some flood damage assessment, and that will come in as additional information to the flood severity alert.
Thank you, Margaret. Thanks a lot. I mean, Peter, I
Sure.
mean, if you want to follow up on with questions to Irvin, and then
Yeah.
I will ask Sela a few ones.
Yes, thanks. Thanks also from my side, Edwin. I've seen that you have answered already a lot of questions in relation to your presentation. So I've kind of grabbed 3 of them, and they're all kind of connected. So there was one question in relation to this an underestimation of stream flow in Glofast during the rainy season in West Africa, and I saw your reply that this is probably one problem. We know that numerical weather predictions in the tropical areas tend to have lower skills. But I wanted to generalize that question a little bit more, and maybe you can comment in the first. So the first question is how can users basically can users know what are the problematic areas where skill is low in or high in certain areas, and how can they find that out? I mean, you saw that, or I saw in your presentation you had something about forecast skill. And then the second question is actually related to that, because when we look at forecast skill, there was a question, why don't we use observed runoff from existing data sources? And I think that's a generic problem with regards to in situ data that many of the colleagues here have. But maybe you can elaborate on that problem with in situ data, and why are we not using this in situ data for skills for having.
Yeah, thanks, Peter, for the questions. As you said, they are kind of like born out of the same issue or problem. I mean, we just to make sure we are using observations, so discharge observations, and although for the forecast skill, this is the first step, basically to look at the predictability. So for basically the forecast, how far it can go. And in this first step, we didn't want to mix the model error with kind of like the predictive error, and therefore only concentrated on using the reanalysis. Generally, discharge observations are kind of sparse, so that obviously all of us, we are suffering from that. So it will only give a sparse look, at least in maybe interesting areas, like especially in Africa. We're obviously working on kind of like acquiring more and more observations, but there will be always kind of gaps in space and importantly in time. More recent periods are even less covered by observations. However, the model performance or the hydrological skill basically is documented against observations. So I would and it is put in the chat, basically the reference to the paper, the Glofast R5 paper. That's basically a good source where you can, at those points where we had observations and where we could actually in that study compare the model performance, where your area is, and basically is it acceptable, is it not acceptable, and in many areas it is pretty good, and in many areas unfortunately it is not very good at the moment. And often in the tropics also, as you've mentioned, related to the lower skill metallurgical forcing and maybe other problems as well, the hydrological skill is still lower. In the future there will be new information provided also on the web, different layers which will show performance, like forecast performance against observations as well.
Okay, thanks Edwin. Roberto, I pass to you.
So yes, I mean, Sela, I think, I mean, your presentation was very much kind of interesting. I mean, a lot of, new items and new food for thought. I mean, also for us, like working in the field. And you've received, I mean, so many questions. I mean, again, I picked just, I mean, one or two, three actually, that I think, I mean, are representative. The first one actually is many questions, but they have all the same, let's say, I mean, scope in a sense. I mean, so about, you know, the data needs, I mean, for, you know, training, basically the machine learning, I mean, model that, I mean, you presented. I mean, there are evidently, I mean, concerns about, you know, the level of how deep in time, I mean, the training data set should go. I mean, what is the, you know, the type of input data and target data that you would like to use. I mean, so I read in all these questions, like, I mean, some concerns about, you know, the portability. I mean, to, you know, at a global scale where, you know, data scarcity is certainly an issue. I mean, that's not, let's say, not everywhere we have the luxury of having the same, you know, data sets that you've been using in the US. And so, I mean, maybe, I mean, if you could reply, I mean, on to the portability of these type of models, I mean, on a larger domain, also like in places where, you know, the data availability, I mean, in times and space, I mean, is very scarce. And that is the first, I mean, point. The second one was about the availability of the Google Alert. I mean, that, I mean, was raised. I mean, is that available? And you said, yes, I mean, it is. I would be actually, I mean, interested in learning a little bit more about the institutional setup that you have, I mean, in delivering these alerts. I know you have, I mean, a good setup, for example, in India, but I mean, going again to a global scale, I mean, how do you see this happening? Because we always know that, you know, this type of alerts, I mean, is a sensitive issue, I mean, in terms of responsibility for institutions. So how Google, I mean, is dealing with that. And the final one, it's on the DEM generation using the optical images, which is a very interesting topic. And the question there, maybe, I mean, nobody asked, I would ask, I mean, is that the accessibility of that data set that, I mean, looks very interesting, I mean, for, you know, different types of studies, I mean, including also, you know, morphological studies and so forth. So also that part, I mean, if you could tell us, I mean, if that is available and where and how basically, I mean, this could be accessible. You can start, I mean, from anywhere, and I can repeat, you know, the questions if you don't remember them. I mean, but
yeah, I'll try to answer all of them. I'm also aware we're limited in time, so I'll try to rush through them. This also applies to the chat. I've tried to answer everything. If there's something I didn't answer, write it again. I missed it. But yeah, thank you all for the questions. So first, in terms of machine learning and data needs. So I think in general, it is definitely true that machine learning methods are kind of data hungry, and data driven in general methods are need more data. I think when used intelligently, though, they can actually be useful in data scarce regions. And that's actually where we've done most of our work. So it's easier to publish, right? So our academic publications are usually in places like the US, but actually most of our work is in India and Bangladesh, which have very serious data scarcity problems. And just the two things that I kind of slightly mentioned in the talk are, one, if you break the assumption that you can't learn across basins, then you can require more data overall, but less data per basin. And that's kind of in the hydrologic modeling, I think, one of the best advantages of these LSTM-based methods. And we actually have a separate paper that I haven't linked to yet, but I can if people are interested, where we show that we actually achieve better results with extremely little historical data. So even after 1 year of data, we can achieve better results when we use this kind of distributed shared model across different basins. And then secondly is how we use optical and SAR imagery to correct our inundation models. So here as well, again, we're kind of overcoming one type of data scarcity, for example, high quality elevation maps and on the ground structures, with utilizing the data that is available globally, like optical and SAR imagery. So that's kind of my short answer for machine learning and data needs, but an important question, just to say, I'm not trying to say, and therefore it'll work everywhere. I'm just saying, it really depends how we apply these models. The second question was about the availability of Google Alerts. So I think there are two main ways to access our alerts. The first, we have two types of interfaces. One is kind of public-facing interfaces. So if you search for floods in your area in Google Search, Maps, and so on. You can see it. You can also see an aggregate of all of our current alerts in g.co/floods. So that's kind of public facing. We also have close collaborations with organizational partners. So with the Indian government, the Bangladeshi government, with the Red Cross, and so on. We currently don't provide a kind of broad institutional public service in the same way that GlobeFest, for example, and NASA do, which I think are doing an amazing, amazing job at that. We don't have currently anything in parallel to that. Maybe we will someday in the future. At the moment, if you want to institutionally utilize our alerts, then you do need to talk to us. And then finally, about the DEM generation. So I'll just very quickly say that, so currently the DEMs themselves, the raw data, we don't share publicly. We're trying to work on making it accessible for academic uses. There are some legal constraints there. But again, if this is something that people are interested in, they can reach out to me, and I can at least keep them updated on what the status is.
Thanks so much. Peter, again to you.
Yes, thanks, thanks, Roberto. Now, Juan, we saw your great presentation on linking basically seasonal forecasts or looking at the seasonal predictability of floods. And rather than asking specifically about an element on your presentation, what comes up always, and I see this in many other presentations when it comes related to seasonal predictability, and the question is, do you have an example how you then can did you put your indicators or your seasonal predictions in practice? Like how, you know, because they're so fundamentally different from a 5-day forecast, let's say, you know, where you predict a certain river discharge. When you look at seasonal or these like predictors for ENSOs, you know, they're usually done at large scale. They're really, they show a different type of information, and hence, what I'm really interested in. Do you have an example of how then a user use the information to make decisions to, this is something which I feel is still an area of work. So, Juan, do you have an example on that?
Okay, thank you very much, Peter. That's a very good questions, which you actually put me on the grill. I don't have really any example yet, and but we do have some thinking about that. And this apparently this is our first step. The first step is try to quantify these kind of relations, which could be very solid at real basin scales, and even further at subcatchment scales. So we can use that information for those individual basin by basin. So, but the questions how, and there are some literature work that has been nicely done there, and we could do that statistically, using that to constrain our dynamic models. At least there are multiple ways to do that. I think that's in our next to-do list. Hopefully, like 1 or 2 years, we can have some examples for you. I would not overpromise that, but at this stage, I would really encourage more colleagues actually do the similar work, replicated our results using different models, and even like observe the data, so we can really have a confidence of this kind of information at basin scale. That can come into play, like even like machine learning methodologies. Those kind of knowledge we can put into our models. So again, we don't have any example yet.
No, thanks. Yes, indeed. I mean, we are looking forward to your next steps on this, and I have a suspicion that we will get more and more examples also from other researchers on how to use the seasonal forecast in the terms of within flood risk management. So thanks, Juan. Roberto, back to you.
Yeah, I mean, we are fast approaching, I mean, I would say the end of the session. So I will actually, I mean, ask Kay one topical question, let's say that is, and then I will pass it over to you, Peter, maybe, I mean, for the closure. Okay, actually, I mean, I think, I mean, here we had like yet another great example of, this, let's say, availability of global flood models. I mean, we've seen GLOFAS. I mean, we know, the global flood, I mean, monitoring system as well. I mean, from US, and your ones is the third one. So my question is, what is the policy of accessibility of, I mean, of today's Earth? And being in love with the idea of the model of models that, I mean, Margaret, I mean, showed, I mean, in the first place. I mean, if you have plans, or there could be plans also, I mean, to augment, for example, the model of models, I mean, ensemble, using, today's Earth. And you think that is feasible, I mean, a possibility or not? Okay.
Thank you. Yeah, that's indeed very good question. And then we are thinking, I mean, basically, the approach is very similar, I guess. And then so, well, I mean, so basically the data policy is, we are trying to provide those data available from, I mean, downloadable, and also can be shown in the website as well, and freely with a registration. And then also for the special collaboration, I mean, because it's kind of restricted to provide forecasted data currently. So we are still working on it, but we cannot provide those information actually for Japan. Outside of the Japan, it's possible. So we are trying to working on this, but well, and then also we are trying to improve the system. And then the one thing I would like to emphasize is the seamless of the model framework. So we are trying to use the same models, same set of models for global system and the regional system. Regional system can be downscaled into 1 kilometer, or I mean, even higher resolution is quite easily. So at academic side, actually, it is really indeed interesting, because there was a kind of academic gap between the scale. I mean, basin scale hydrology and the global scale hydrology, and then there was a kind of debate, but still, I mean, actually both directions are proceeding towards the same, and then regional models also extends to the larger area, and then global scale is now getting a higher resolution. And then, I mean, we are trying to make our model systems capable to, or feasible for the very high resolution as well. So we are trying to extend the kind of system for specific region if there is some needs over those regions, like Japan case. So that's our kind of maybe some of the answers. I mean, answers to some of your questions, not fully. I would end up with it.
Thank you, Kai. I hope, I mean, we will, I mean, see in future. I mean, we see, I mean, that the difference between, the global modeling side and, the catchment basin side, I mean, is definitely, I mean, closing up, I mean, very fast. So, I mean, I would say that we are on the right, I mean, developing in the right direction, also for this community that is mainly involved in the global part. I hope, and you will be able also to work on this, data openness, I mean, and data availability and accessibility part, because I think is important, I mean, really to leverage on, the level of effort that you've done. So let's say the global community would very much benefit for all the good work that you've done in today's Earth. Definitely. Peter, over to you for the closure. We are 8 minutes later than expected, but I think, I mean, we can close here.
Yes. Thanks, Roberto, and really thanks a lot, especially to the 5 speakers. It was really great having you in our second session and hearing from you. So thanks to all. Thanks also to all the participants. I mean, it's really great to see so many of you here. I know for those in the Americas, it's an early start in the day. For those sitting in Asia, it's in Australia, it's probably already bedtime. So it's really great, nevertheless, to bring and so many people together and share the experiences and knowledges about global flood forecasting with you. So I hope you really liked the session, the second session of the GFP. Next week, again, Wednesday, same time, we have the third session on flood hazard, global flood hazard and risk modeling. Also with a range of interesting speakers. So hope to see many of you there. The recordings will, as usual, be made soon available. The presentations that I've seen that have been asked as well, please be patient. We will put everything, if presenters allow, including the presentations on the GFP website once we have finished the cycle of the four sessions. In the meantime, please have a look at the YouTube recordings. Also there you can revisit and hear all the presentations. So thanks again to everybody. Have a good rest of the day, good night, and see you hopefully next week. Okay, bye everybody.
Okay, bye. Bye, thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Okay, and with this,